Hey, how's it going? And welcome to the show. Now today we're going to be talking about the rule of three. So, let's get started.
Now, the rule of three was originally created as a simple means to illustrate the survival capabilities of what the average human can withstand before death, and goes as follows. 3 minutes without air, 3 hours of exposure to harsh conditions, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So, let's break these down one by one and discuss strategies and gear options to help mitigate or minimize these issues. As humans, we need to breathe in oxygen to survive, exhaling carbon dioxide as a byproduct. Without oxygen, our bodies quickly break down, leading to death within several minutes. Now, when out in the backcountry, especially when out on the water, the most common way to suffer from lack of oxygen is death by drowning. So if you're going to be out on the water, the best way to mitigate this risk is to make sure to wear a properly fitting PFD, along with having adequate boat safety gear, including a bailer, 30 feet of floating rope, or a proper throw rope, a whistle, and some form of waterproof light, like a flashlight or a headlamp. There are actually plenty of pre-made boat safety kits available on the market, like those made by Fox 40. They are inexpensive and contain the basic legally required safety gear inside. You can also put together your own kit with more quality gear options if you so choose. Now, if your adventure includes whitewater, then the risk of drowning is much higher and your gear needs will be more substantial. At a minimum, you'll need a well-fitted whitewater helmet for impact protection against rocks and other debris. For underwater rope entanglement, you should also have a river rescue knife with a blunted tip, preferably mounted on your PFD for ease of access. My advice, don't cheap out on nautical safety gear. Spend the extra few bucks and buy a PFD you like and will actually wear. Now, this is a big one, as it really doesn't take much time exposed to the elements to have a severe and potentially deadly toll on the human body, whether it be from extreme heat to frigid sub-zero temperatures, or from simply being cool and wet for prolonged periods. For most people, running into trouble out in the wilderness or nautical scenarios is usually dealing with cold and wet conditions that will plague most. This is particularly true in the late season. If you're left exposed for too long, there are various ailments you may want to look out for, with the two most common being hypothermia and frostbite. Now, for quick reference, hypothermia is a condition where your body loses more heat than it can produce, leading to your core body temperature dropping to below normal. With most, it rests around 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. If left exposed or untreated, your body begins to shut down, with telltale signs including uncontrolled fits of shivering, confusion, clumsy hands and poor coordination, memory loss, slurred speech, irrational behavior, blurred vision, drowsiness, and complete exhaustion, leading to unconsciousness and eventually death. Prevention is by far the best way to deal with hypothermia, but if you need to treat it in the field, remove and replace all wet clothing with a new set, followed by immediate rewarming. This may need to be a gradual or a fast process, depending on the scenario, as those who have lost a lot of heat rapidly need to rewarm rapidly, whereas those who have lost heat over a long period of time need to rewarm more slowly. For instance, if someone falls in icy cold water, they need to get warm and dry quick, whereas someone who has slowly gotten cold over long extended periods, it's best to rewarm them slowly to not shock the system. Now, with hypothermia, you aren't out of the woods once you've been warmed back up to your normal core temperature, as continued rest and rewarming are required to build up stores of energy for a full recovery. And on another note, if you or another person is suffering from hypothermia and find themselves getting sleepy or losing consciousness, fight the urge to fall asleep by jostling, keeping up conversation, and by making noise or playing music. Many have actually perished in their sleep because of this, some even taking off their clothes before doing so. Be prudent, keep your wits, know the signs, and deal with it before it gets out of hand. Now, frostbite, on the other hand, occurs when your skin or flesh freezes, dropping below 0 degrees Celsius, with initial symptoms including a prickly sensation in the affected area, followed by pale, waxy-looking patches on the skin, leading to numbness in that region. As it progresses, it leads to what's called advanced frostbite, where the flesh becomes hard to the touch with severe pain, leading to swelling and blistering before the flesh turns black, dies, and ultimately falls off. Frostbite occurs mostly in areas exposed to the elements like the nose, ears, and face, but can also sneak up on you in the extremities, with fingers and toes being the worst hit, especially in individuals with poor circulation. With frostbite, it's best to keep an eye out for it and to keep your skin protected from the elements. But if you need to treat it, it's best to rewarm the afflicted area with warm water at around 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit. In severe cases, do not rub the affected area or expose it to open flame, and do not burst the blisters. Rewarm with caution. Severe pain is an indicator it was rewarmed too quickly. Now, prevention is the best way to mitigate complications in cold weather. So to address these issues, it's best to understand the principles of heat loss and the 5 ways the human body loses heat. Because we are warm-blooded animals, we naturally produce our own heat, which helps in the regulation of our body temperature. Now, to deal with heat loss via radiation effectively, it's best to keep your body insulated from the cold. This usually comes down to your choice in clothing, sleeping bag, and shelter, as these all help in retaining your natural body heat and protect you from the elements. In regards to your choice of clothing, it really depends on your geographic location, time of year, and what kind of weather you're likely going to be facing. I find it's best to have a layering system with a breathable, windproof, and waterproof shell on the outside with inner layers made from synthetic technical fibers like fleece, nylon, and polyester, or from natural fibers like wool or down. One thing to think about is that when it comes to heat retention and insulation, pound for pound, nothing can beat natural fibers like wool or down, whereas synthetic options are usually cheaper and are generally better at repelling moisture. For instance, duck or goose down is one of the best natural materials for heat retention while taking up little to no room in your pack, but will lose all insulating properties when wet. So if you're going to use a down-filled sleeping bag or clothing layers, take care to keep them dry and use dry bags when storing them in a pack. You can also lose a substantial amount of heat off the top of your head, so I personally always bring some kind of toque or beanie with me on trip, even in the summer months, and suggest you do the same, opting for a trap hat made with real fur in the winter months. Heat loss through conduction occurs when your body comes into contact with a surface lower than your body temperature, like a metal object or the cold ground. Prolonged contact will result in you transferring heat away from your body and into the cold object. This is the reason why it's best to insulate yourself off the ground using a sleeping pad at night to prevent the transfer of heat from your body into the cold ground below. But when it comes to heat loss through conduction, nothing will kill you as quickly as submersion in cold water. In fact, the human body loses heat 25 to 30 times faster in cold water than in air at the same temperature, leading to hypothermia in 30 minutes or less. Now, I can't stress it enough, but submersion in cold water is a real big killer, and the best way to mitigate this risk is by wearing appropriate clothing, as there are a variety of gear options to choose from. For example, a wetsuit is a great option to keep you warm when in the water, as they are designed to take in a thin small layer of water inside the suit, allowing your body temperature to warm it up inside the wetsuit, essentially using conduction to keep you warm with a thin layer of water warmed up by your body temperature. This acts as an insulating layer that will keep you warm in cold water while still providing a high level of comfort and mobility. There are also dry tops and dry suits that are designed to keep you dry even when fully submerged. This is accomplished by being made from heavy-duty, impermeable materials with fully sealed gaskets around your extremities and neck. If you're a paddler looking for the ultimate in protection from submersion in cold water, then a full-body dry suit is the best option available as long as you're willing to sacrifice comfort, especially around the neck. For those who spend a lot of time out on the ice in the winter, there are flotation coats, pants, and full one-piece suits available. These are designed to both keep you warm and afloat in case you fall through the ice, a popular choice for snowmobilers and ice fishermen. Now try to avoid wearing cotton clothing at all costs in wet and cold conditions, as cotton has a tendency to keep you cold when wet and takes very long time to dry. One of the ways our body regulates excess heat is by sweating. This occurs when our core temperature rises and we produce sweat that has a cooling effect as it evaporates away from the skin. This usually happens when it gets hot outside or when you physically exert yourself in an effort for the body to prevent overheating. This is all great in warm weather, but in cold conditions, this can be detrimental, even deadly. This is because after you've exerted yourself, your sweat can cool you down too much, moving much needed heat away from your body and can even freeze on the inside of your clothing. As the famous survivalist Les Stroud has once said, "You sweat, you die." This is why I'm such an advocate of using a layering system for my outdoor clothing, as one of the benefits of using a layering system is that you get more control over your body temperature when compared to wearing a single heavy coat. In that as it gets colder, you can add more layers, and as you warm or become more active, you can then delayer to prevent sweat buildup. This helps to keep you from overheating and getting wet from your own sweat during the periods in which you are most physically active. This can later cause you to become damp and cold when the temperature drops or when you become more inactive. Heat loss via convection is caused by moving air robbing you of heat as it brushes by your skin. Many refer to this effect as wind chill, which often causes it to feel much colder than the actual temperature outside. This can be especially brutal in cold conditions, and the best way to effectively deal with this is to have a windproof and waterproof outer shell that will protect you from the cold wind while out in the bush. We as humans need to breathe, and when we do so, we expel heat as a byproduct. We breathe in air, our body then warms it up, and then is exhaled as we breathe outwards, leading to heat loss. This is inevitable and is naturally occurring, but can be mitigated through the use of a mouth covering like a balaclava or neck gaiter. Breathing through your nose can also marginally help in heat retention and will reduce frost buildup in your beard, as the moisture in your breath can freeze rapidly in cold conditions. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, extreme heat can also have a detrimental, even lethal effect on the human body. It doesn't take much to succumb to heat-related issues, and they can rapidly sneak up on you, quickly getting worse if you aren't careful. This is especially true in wilderness scenarios where you can't just run inside and hide from the heat with the AC blasting. If exposed to high temperatures for too long, especially when in conjunction with humidity and physical activity, hypothermia can quickly set in. This is described as your core body temperature rising above normal, failing to cool itself on its own, manifesting itself as heat exhaustion and eventually as heat stroke. Heat exhaustion is essentially what happens when your body fails to cool down through perspiration and then begins to overheat with symptoms including fatigue, heavy sweating, cool moist skin with goosebumps despite the heat, headache, dizziness, muscle cramps, nausea, faintness, a weak rapid pulse, and low blood pressure when standing. Over time, heat exhaustion can eventually lead to heat stroke, which has the potential to be a life-threatening condition. This occurs when the body overheats to an internal core temperature of at least 40 degrees Celsius or 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, the symptoms of heat stroke can be similar to those of heat exhaustion, but can also include vomiting, rapid breathing, flushed red skin, and a racing fast heart rate. But the big one to look out for is an altered mental state. This can look like agitation, deliriousness, or confusion, often with slurred speech or troubled speaking. Now, another thing to think about is the effect that the sun has on the human body. It acts like a multiplier in that it's hotter when directly under its gaze, and its UV rays will burn exposed human skin, even through thin cloud cover, and will also cause eye damage to those who look at it. In fact, the sun can actually be quite blinding when reflecting off the water or snow, so I'd always recommend bringing a decent pair of sunglasses to mitigate that issue. Now, to beat the heat, the best thing to do is to be proactive about it. Wear light clothing that wicks away moisture and protects you from damaging UV radiation. Also, bring a solid hat with a brim of some kind, whether it be a baseball cap, a boonie hat, or a wide-brimmed tilly hat. You can also manage your time wisely by traveling at cooler times of the day, like first thing in the morning or before sundown. Avoid strenuous physical activity during the hottest hours of the day. Seek out shaded areas and stay out of direct sunlight as much as possible. Drink lots of water, even when you aren't terribly thirsty, and swim frequently, as this is one of the fastest and most effective ways to lower your body temperature while out in the bush. It also doesn't hurt to carry a bandana or neck gaiter to cool yourself off when things get hot, as you can drench them in water and wear them on your head to aid in temperature regulation. In regards to your choice of shelter, it really depends on what weather conditions you'll be facing, size of group, and its overall weight. But ultimately, it should protect you from the elements and keep you both warm and dry. Essentially, your choice of shelter should accommodate the needs of your trip, so knowing what to expect is definitely a plus. Now, on top of that, I would also highly suggest you bring a sturdy tarp to protect you, your gear, and your firewood from rainy conditions. On a side note, a tarp can also be used as a shelter in almost all conditions, an essential gear item if you ask me. You can also make a variety of shelters using natural materials. For most paddlers, dying of dehydration is a rare occurrence as you are literally surrounded by the stuff. Nevertheless, access to clean drinking water is a must, and having the appropriate gear to accommodate those needs is crucial when out in the wild for prolonged periods. To prevent getting sick from dirty or contaminated drinking water, it's generally best to treat your water in some way, shape, or form. This can be done effectively with a portable water filter, purifier, or with a water purification tablets. When in doubt, boil. In winter conditions, you can always boil ice and snow. This will likely be your primary means of treating water at this time of year. So in short, having a compact pot set and a small camp stove like the MSR Whisperlight can make all the difference out there, as well as having a reliable fire starting device and cutting tool for making fire out in the bush. Fire will not only keep you warm, but can also be used to cook your food and to treat your water effectively. Now, if you're really in a pickle and need to collect clean drinking water from your surroundings when resources are low and there isn't an obvious body of water around, in this kind of circumstance, you can always collect rainwater or the dew off of the surrounding vegetation. Rainwater, as long as it's not acid rain, and dew are generally safe to drink when untreated. In regards to wilderness survival, food is actually not an immediate priority, as most people can hack it without food for up to 3 weeks. But because food is the fuel that powers our bodies, the longer you go without eating, the weaker you become. Your body needs calories to both survive and to power its basic functions. When you deprive yourself of these things, it leads to your body burning off its fat reserves, then followed by your muscle mass, and eventually leading to death by starvation. When planning a trip, always bring ample amounts of calorie-dense food for the entire group, with a little bit extra for emergencies. So if you find yourself in a situation where you don't have any food and you are out in the bush in the middle of nowhere, then there are several things you can do to feed yourself out there. First off, you can always try to harvest food in the wild by hunting, fishing, or trapping game animals. And if you know what you're looking for, you can also collect a variety of wild edibles to help sustain yourself, with obvious choices like wild blueberries and wintergreen. But I wouldn't rely on it always being there, especially on multi-day wilderness ventures. Always bring enough food, never assume you're going to find wild edibles or going to catch the big one. If you're considering eating a plant found in the wild, but you don't know if it's safe to eat, then you can use the edible plant identification method, commonly known as the edibility test, where you incrementally test it on your skin and then consume small amounts of the plant in question, waiting several hours each time, looking for adverse reactions. Now, there's a lot to discuss in regards to wild edibles and the edibility test, enough so that I'd like to make a video dedicated to that subject entirely, so stay tuned for that one in the future. On another note, avoid eating mushrooms in the wild, as a large portion are toxic, with many being difficult to properly identify. If you're going to be harvesting mushrooms, you really need to know what you're looking for, so if you aren't sure, just don't do it. Now, the rule of 3 is not truly definitive for everyone, more of a general guideline, as there are plenty of exceptions to the rule. People's bodies are all different, with some individuals being able to withstand harsher conditions for longer than others, whereas some can hold their breath longer than others, etc. Now, with the right combination of knowledge, skills, equipment, luck, and the sheer will to persevere, you can survive more than you know.
Well, thanks again, everyone. Hope this was helpful. Have a good one and get out there and explore. If you enjoyed this content, give it a like, subscribe, and click the notification bell for more Tripping Authority videos.